Very, very brief and quick.
Thank you very much. My question is directed to the former President Thabo Mbeki. My name is Ivan Gambonani. I'll try to be very short, but I would have liked to lay a basis for my question. So, President Mkapa has spoken about the question of land ownership. And I've realized that most of the sub-Saharan citizens have been struggling in accessing land for economic development and other things. Now, President Thabo Mbeki, the question is, since 1994, we have adopted a constitution in terms of which it makes it difficult for the citizen to access land. We have also adopted legislative mechanism in an attempt to make sure that the citizens access land for transformation purposes and for other purposes, and these legislative measures have failed. So my question to you is that how best suited can Africa as a whole, and South Africa, and South Africa's citizens in particular, can be able to achieve land in order to access natural resources and other resources related thereto? Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. We know the question. We take the second one very rapidly. Can the people with the mics move quicker to the people whose hands are up so that we should not lose time passing the mic and getting the speaker? I recognize the gentleman in a red tie. We'll come back to you, sir, afterwards. After we've gone around. Thank you, sir. Your name first and where you come from.
My name is Thabo Mbeki. Good evening, President Mbeki and President Mkapa. We see that in our continent, we've got a lot of wars. Some of them, they are more based on the continent, or they are actually fueled by foreign Western forces. What is it, in your opinion, that we lack as Africans in order to be able to protect our own sovereignty, and in order for our leaders in our own continent to protect one another? And also, President Mbeki, in your opinion, you are an advocate of two-term. Why is it that then you availed yourself in the ANC, NEC for presidency the third term?
Okay. We move to this part. Very quickly, I think it's a lady in a white top. While they go there, in this side, I'll recognize you, sir, in the white top. Who is here? That looks like in the you, sir. Yeah? We'll come to you, give him a mic. Thank you. The lady in a trench coat.
Yeah.
Thank you. Your name, please?
My name is Lupio Mgudlwa. I'd like to appreciate firstly the input from the speaker. It was very provocative, and it's very interesting to note that African leaders are really looking at young people to liberate Africa. My question really, or statement, is in trying to answer the question of ensuring that as young people we transform Africa, what seed are we planting in terms of conscientizing young Africans about themselves being Africans, but beyond that, understanding that Africa is with them, so that we are able to have conscious young people who are able to move the agenda of African renaissance forward. I think that's a question that I'd like to have answered or looked into. Thank you.
Thanks. We have 3 questions. We'll take 2 more and give the speakers an opportunity to respond. We don't have the whole night. I know it's very rare that we have an opportunity like this, but we have to be also conscious of the time. The gentleman, yeah, shoot.
Thanks, Chairperson. I would like to thank all the speakers tonight. My question really is a follow-up to, for starters, my name is Russell Baloi, and I'm from NVDev. My question really is a follow-up to your comment about the need to build capacity to negotiate. I agree with you. And a quick reflection, not only on South Africa, but also to our neighbors in Zimbabwe and many other African countries. I'm well convinced that some of the negotiations that led to where we are and the conclusions that we made then were not really satisfactory. And I would want to get your views on what do you think on the possibility of opening up some discussion in terms of some of the compromises that we made. Because I strongly believe that to some degree, as Africans who were shortchanged, we can better negotiate now.
Thank you. I think we'll stop now, this time, and give the opportunity to our African elders to ponder, to perhaps reflect on some of the questions raised, in some cases opinions. May I check, Patron, Excellency Mkapa, who wants to go first?
President Mkapa starts.
Thank you so much. Yes. President Mkapa, you were asked about the capacity to negotiate. To what extent are we going to achieve that? You were also both asked about why it is that as Africans, we are not managing to protect our sovereignty and we're forever in war. There was a reflection on the land ownership question and access to land, but that was more for our patron. Yes.
Well, why can't we protect ourselves? I think the key thing is why must we go to war, whether internally or across borders.
Yes.
I place a great deal of importance on continuing the task of building national unity. If the founding fathers were able to unite people across faiths, ethnicities, and so on, we must educate ourselves to say the colonial authority is no longer here. We have a common future, and therefore the unity is even more important than it used to be. That depends on leadership, and that depends on the kind of consensual vision which unites the people together. We have them in a number of countries. We have programs called 2020, others are 2025, others are 2050. They spell out the foundations of their society, how they are going to share resources, how they are going to build the future, and so on. So leadership has to undertake the task of bringing the people together to reach the consensus. And then secondly, across borders, you must build the structures that allow for cooperation and potential conflict resolution. We have that in the East African community. We have a charter, we have mechanisms. Again, whether you resort to them rather than go to war depends on the quality of leadership that you have. I think I'll have to leave it to that. Leadership and the consensual vision. And it's an ongoing task. But again, I have to emphasize, everyone has to feel that they have a stake in unity and peace. Everyone, young and old, have beens and their time has come. We all have a stake. If you have that, then it's easy to build these others. On the youth, I'm a fervent believer in a youth movement, but that's specific of Tanzania. When you have a youth movement, it brings together youth of every ethnicity, every faith, everything together to do a kind of national service which builds a sense of nationhood together. That is extremely useful. Now, some countries are too big for that, but at least there you get a core of youth that really has reached one another, knows one another, and has a common commitment to build a country together. That for me is key. And negotiating capacity, I think the fault is much more on the part of leadership than, let me put it on both sides. The leadership are first to rush to foreigners for advice. Truly, really, I mean, I know it. I'll not say any more than that. But on the other hand, I do believe that our experts are not sufficiently assertive. They have a right to demand of their leaders that their knowledge and experience be used. Do you know? You get fellows from the IMF and the World Bank who have never run a corner store. They They are quickly received at State House for hours in discussions giving advice. When you have professors in your own areas, you have business people in your own country, you don't even have a national business council with whom you have a regular discuss regularly. So, I would say to leaders, wake up and see what wealth you have in your hands in the form of your academics and your business people, and reach out to them. That's all I have to say. Sorry.
Thanks.
Let me start by saying I really ought not to be here. Yeah, I'm here to hold President Mkapa's hand. We are all here. We are South Africans. We live together here. We can have our own conversation every day. He will be leaving us tomorrow. So you won't have chance to ask him questions like that. Me, you can. So, direct questions to him, not me.
Okay.
You know, this, the President Mkapa spoke about the need to ensure, to build capacity to implement what we decide. And it's a very critical point. It relates to all of these questions that are being raised. So I think that when he's putting out this challenge to the youth, to see themselves as instruments, agents for progressive change, for progressive transformation. Now that's a very difficult challenge. It's partly difficult because it then requires specific focus. Focus on the actual capacity to change things. So for instance, there was somebody that was saying that we were shortchanged during the negotiations. We should reopen that. I would contest that. And the reason I would contest it is because if I ask the question, what were the specific circumstances in 1990, 94, during which those negotiations took place? And you'll find that those specific circumstances had a very direct impact on the outcome that was achieved. He was saying that part of the danger we face is the longer we move away from the history, the period of colonization and apartheid, the more we forget what used to be the case. If you understood the circumstances of the day, you will understand why there was a particular outcome. So, it's important really to understand that, because to be this agent of change, you've got to deal with these actual practicalities and understanding of our own reality. Not as we want ourselves to be, but as we are. You see, the land question. The land question, for instance, there is no common African land problem. Doesn't exist. The land question manifests itself in very many different ways in the different African countries. The challenges, therefore, will differ. Here, the problem that we have in South Africa, that you'd have in Zimbabwe, that you have in Namibia, of large land dispossession during the period of colonization, is not typical of the rest of the continent. It's specific to these countries. You had a little bit of it, for instance, in Zambia, not to this extent here. So I'm saying that it's necessary to understand the actuality that we're dealing with in order to be able to change it. The issue that's raised about wars and so on, again, I would say I would give the same answer. That would have to understand these wars in their specific settings. Why did the Sudanese fight each other? the north and the south. There's a reason for that. It'll be different from what might have caused the war among the Ivorians in Cote d'Ivoire. So the question as to why we can't achieve peace on the continent, I'm saying, has to be answered in these very specific ways that relate to the actuality of each situation. I want to insist on this because indeed what President Mkapa was saying is critically important. The historical role of the present generation of the youth leadership that is here. To exercise that leadership, we have to be quite specific in terms of what we want to do, what needs to be done. And indeed, including the matter that is raised as to what might be done to raise the level of consciousness among the youth. That's what President Mkapa was doing this evening, to raise this level of consciousness among the youth. And indeed, we've got to find ways and means of interacting among ourselves. I wish we could keep him here for a week. And so that he can have workshops and so on with many youth to interact with them, to ask him many questions. I was in Tanzania, 2009. The youth of the ruling party, Chama Cha Mapinduzi, they asked me to come. And they presented a very interesting case. They said to me, look, and they also brought some veterans, old veterans who were the leaders of the independent struggle and so on, older even than President Mkapa here. So they said, look, you see these are our veterans who organized in Tanganyika and brought us our freedom. But they know nothing about computers and emails and the internet, so they can't teach us anything. Now, we have those skills. Very good young people. They said, look, this one is a qualified accountant, that one is a university lecturer, that one is something else. Thanks to the independence of Tanzania, it created space for us like this. But they said there's a problem. We have these skills which are globally marketable. And because of access to internet and all of this, we are very much exposed to other people's cultures and all of that. We are cosmopolitan. And we will take over the leadership here in Tanzania. The problem is that we don't have the value system which drove these older people. So they said, help. Don't worry about our technical skills. We know about computers and internet and all that. But how do we gather these values so that we use these capacities we have to change the Tanzanian society in the interest of the people? So we said we were there together, that occasion, and we discussed this thing with the Tanzanian youth. So I'm saying, I think it's quite clear that we need this continuous process of engagement. We'll have to bring him back to do that. The ANC constitution doesn't have term limits. Indeed, there may be maybe I should go beyond that. You see, we shouldn't transform issues that are really of kind of a tactical nature into strategic issues.
That's right.
The United Kingdom,
Yes.
the United Kingdom does not have a process of term limitations in terms of government. Doesn't have. Neither does Sweden have, the Netherlands, many. Who says they are not democratic? No, the issue of term limits on the continent here, again, I'm coming back to our understanding our objective reality. It arose because you had a long period of military coups and military governments and all of that. And in the process of the democratization, general feeling on the continent was that let's find a way of avoiding these people who perpetuate themselves in government forever, and therefore let's do term limits. It was as a reaction to what had been happening. Now, the fact that the United Kingdom does not have term limits does not make it any less democratic. Sten Ryland, I see here from Sweden.
Yeah.
The Swedes don't have term limits. Doesn't make Sweden less democratic. If African countries decide not to have term limits, why would they be less democratic? So, so I'm saying that this was a tactical response to a particular history. And now we want to turn this into a principle, like it comes from the Bible or the Quran or something. Thanks, Maureen.
Okay, thank you. We don't have the whole night. This is so much fun. I'm enjoying it, but we need to keep to time. We're going to take only 4 questions. 1, 2, 3, 4, I'm afraid. We saw a gentleman right there, his hand was up earlier. Please, very brief, very short. And then this side, let's see who we recognize, the gentleman there. This side, any takers? Going. The lady in the green, there she is. This side, opportunity going. Right at the bottom. Yes, right at the bottom, the lady with the turban. Yes, thank you. Very quickly, sir, shoot.
My name is Hope Papo. The question is directed at President Mkapa. I agree with President Mbeki that we'll deal with our own issues at home. How do we build capacity to negotiate and challenge the developed world without personal and collective discipline and integrity? I think maybe you need to comment just on the issue of personal and collective integrity. And it's linked to a leader on the African continent is given shares in a French company, ask favors from a French president or whatever country to do personal favors to that leader. Is it possible really for that leader to stand in the World Forum and challenge that what is happening when they themselves personally and collectively are compromised? They don't have discipline and personal integrity.
Thank you. That row, yes. Your name, sir?
Thank you. My name is Anton Toligasbia. I'm from Eastern Cape at NMMU. I'm a leader myself, President.
Yes, leader, please proceed.
My question is on the former president of Tanzania on NEPAD and APRM. How do we strengthen them and create them to foster economic development in our society? Because you'll agree with me that Africa generally is still trampled in poverty and underdevelopment and high rate of unemployment. How do we empower, strengthen these two for the society to achieve what they want to achieve? Thanks.
Thank you, sir. The lady, very quickly, I hope the mic is with you already. Timalites, move quicker, we don't have time.
Yes, I want to ask a question to the former president of Tanzania. Your Excellency, you spoke about transformational leadership, but the challenge which we still have is to define the type of value system that will be combined with the economic interests of our leaders to foster transformational change in Africa. To what extent and where are we supposed to pull these values?
Okay. Question about values.
Hello? Okay.
I recognize the lady right at the bottom. There. Thank you.
My
Thank you,
name
ma'am.
is Bushiho Matlo. I happen to have lived in Tanzania from 1963 to 1966 as a child. So nataka kusema nikukaribisha hapa Afrika Kusini baba. President Mbeki has already thanked you on behalf of our people for hosting us. I want to thank you from the ground, because if not for Tanzania and the other African countries that hosted us, God knows whether we would have managed to get rid of the evil of apartheid. I do want to suggest to African leaders to perhaps consider a change of strategy. I'm thinking if you put women in power, the situation will be different. I'm thinking if you've had more Salif Johnsons on this continent, we will be able to breed a new type of leadership on the African continent. Thank you.
Are you going to speak? Sir, I had recognized the lady in the green, the one next to you. Yes. She doesn't want to speak anymore?
No, it's just for me. Yeah.
Oh, it was for you. Oh.
Yeah, that's right.
Okay.
Thank you.
I thought you were speaking on her behalf.
Okay, thank you. My name is Zulumatabo Zulu from Zulumatabo on the internet. And the question is relating to the dependency syndrome that was raised by the keynote speaker. And basically, I just want to understand as to what will it take for us as an African country to resist dependency on Western institutions. A specific example here is that, for example, South Africa, since 1994, they never had any debt with the World Bank for quite a long time. But just a few years ago, the state utility ESCOM that provides electricity decided to borrow money from the World Bank, and so when that happens, it looks like that was a kind of a step backward vis-a-vis what you just talked about, dependency syndrome. And we have a small country like Botswana that doesn't have a debt with World Bank. So my question is, what will it take for us to resist the dependency?
Thank you, sir. We're going to give the opportunity.
Hello.
I know everyone wants to ask the very last question.
One last question.
But I'm afraid we will give the second and last opportunity to to our elders to address us on some of the questions that have been asked. Time.
Thank
time.
you. Thank you, Director of Programs. I shall answer in 2 sentences only for each question. Indebtedness. Don't borrow. Truly. But of course, in order to borrow, you must prepare your people to be prepared to sacrifice as the price of their dignity. Because ultimately you do have to pay, and it's the people that are going to pay. So if you put the case that you don't have to get $50 million from a particular country for your country to develop, that you yourselves, by your own efforts, can achieve that $50 million on your own strength, by your cooperative spirit and in dignity, you don't have to borrow. Really, you don't. You borrow only for those things that really do require external purchasing, for instance. I mean, when it comes to electricity, equipment like that, you don't manufacture to yourself. But these things like, building a half-kilometer road where you get the diplomat coming to open it with the president, this is ridiculous. And they tell you that the interest rates are low. 1%, 1.2%. Why don't you give it to me? Give it to me as a grant. Why must you lend me? Can you imagine a country like the Congo, which I agree Mobutu, stole and left it naked. But they are being asked to pay the debts which they borrowed, which Mobutu borrowed for his own satisfaction. The poverty of a Congo, you are asking those people to be more poor in order to pay these debts that were incurred by those people. No. It's better to turn to your people and say, we don't have to borrow. Let us drop the bucket where we are, and we will get along. That's what I would. And it's not very difficult. In the elections of the year 2000 in my country, the European Union ambassador came, and said, we are prepared to meet some of the costs of these things. I said, fine. We put out a tender for the printing of the ballot papers and the other election materials. When a European firm did not win that tender, he came around to us and said, no, we can't accept this. So I said to them, we will not accept your money either, even if it's a grant. And we printed them in South Africa and paid them for ourselves. We paid them with our own money in South Africa. He found some other way of using that money in order to clear his conscience, but that's a different story. So it can be done. I'm sorry, I've spoken more than 2 sentences. Women in power, I agree. But again, you see, all things being equal, if you are going to build a modern state, you need leadership which is well educated, which is well informed, which has all the values that you have described, honesty, integrity, and so on. If the social and educational milieu is one oppressive to women, what happens when I appoint a woman minister in the government? She will not be able to administer or to be taken very seriously. I'm saying. But if you have an egalitarian system all round, in terms of education, then you can. In my time is when we started putting a quota, mind you, regardless of the state of education in our country. We said there must be at least a quarter of the members of parliament must be women. And then we started putting more of them in cabinet. And now this year we are close to what, 45%? That's right, 45% of the MPs. So putting them now is not an issue, well, if you have the right disposition. But I emphasize giving them an opportunity to learn, to acquire skills, and to be open to appointment. That environment is necessary. And that's where it starts.
I think it's a very important point that President Mkapa was making about that accountability. Because indeed, I am quite sure that perhaps Bishop Sioka perhaps your most devoted participants, attenders of church service on Sundays, among many of us as leaders, some of the most crooked people. We come to church, you bless us so that indeed we look like what in fact we're not. You can't even depend on Bishop's yoga to change that. But I'm saying that you need the people. You need the people to say no, no, no. And that's critical. But Maureen, let me again fight. Oh, okay, go on.
No, one final word before I leave.
Yes.
To the lady who spent her 3 or 4 years of her youth in my country, I want to say to you that we did what we could to the best of our ability to help the struggle. But the struggle was fundamentally yours. We played a very small part. I think he'll probably remember that what I used to do was to read the communiques of these presidents when they were meeting. But I really want to say that we thank you for making it possible for some of us to see a democratic South Africa. You know, I started off my career as a journalist for the party newspapers, supporting the liberation struggle every other day, harsh language, tough and so on. It never occurred to me that I would live the day in which I would step into a democratic South African soil. And watching in the swearing in of President Mandela, then my brother here. Bishop, I'm ready for my maker to call me now. Thank you very much.
Thanks. No, I just wanted to say, Maureen, again, thanks indeed to Ben Mkapa for coming. Yes. And thanks to everybody for coming for this Africa Day lecture. Today, there's an extraordinary summit of the African Union started this afternoon in Addis Ababa. It will go on until tomorrow. And it was convened, it's an extraordinary summit. It was convened to respond to some of the questions that have been put. Some of the questions, some of the points that President Mkapa was making. Because I think all of us can see that part of what is happening now is a growing and a consistent process of the marginalization of the African Union, even on African questions. People from outside are taking decisions about us. And when we take these decisions about ourselves and say, this is what we need to do, they say, but why should we listen to you? One of the matters that will be discussed is the situation in Libya. Because ahead of everybody else, the African Union took decisions, specific decisions about what to do to resolve that problem in Libya. Security Council came a week later. In its resolution, it said, we acknowledge what the African Union has decided, but this is what we're going to do. That's one of the issues that is being discussed at this extraordinary summit. There are other issues relating to this. They relate essentially to this question. What do we do as Africans to recapture the capacity to determine our own future? Because you can see it is eroding. We've been involved in all manner of negotiations on the continent to solve African challenges. Certainly in every single instance, if in negotiations in which I've been involved on the continent, every single instance, the occasions when things would go wrong would be when there's other people intervene to tell us what we should do. Now, hopefully, when the extraordinary summit of the African Union concludes tomorrow, they will have taken some decisions about what we should do. I'm saying all of this to say thank you very much indeed to President Mkapa for coming here. And for us, as South Africans, perhaps this older generation, perhaps these ones who spent a few years in Tanzania, what Tanzania was and what Tanzania did for itself, for the continent, has been very fundamental to our education, to our upbringing. And indeed what I've just spoken about now, about the reassertion of our own right to determine our destiny, that's one of the first lessons we learned in Tanzania. Thank you very much, President, for coming. Thanks a lot, More.
Thank you indeed. Let's give both of them another rousing round of applause. Woo, 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 woo!